Last Christmas morning, my mother stood in our family kitchen, coffee mug in hand, delivering what she thought was the perfect blow to my self-esteem. Your sister bought a house. When will you settle down, Serafina? She asked with that familiar condescending smile. I just smiled back, knowing something she did not. You see that house my sister supposedly bought, I owned it. The mortgage was in my name. The down payment came from my account. But here's the twist that would destroy our family forever. Before we dive into how my own mother became my greatest enemy, tell me where you are watching from today. If this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next will show you that sometimes the quietest revenge is the sweetest. Trust me, you will want to see how this Christmas revelation led to the most satisfying family karma you could imagine. Growing up as the younger daughter in the Morrison family, I learned early that my sister Vivian was the golden child. Everything she touched turned to success in my parents' eyes, while my achievements were either minimized or attributed to luck. When I graduated summa cum laude from business school, my mother said I was book smart but lacked real-world experience. When Vivian barely passed her communications degree, she was naturally gifted with people skills. The financial manipulation started subtly when I turned 25 and began earning serious money as a financial analyst. My parents constantly emphasized how Vivian struggled as a freelance graphic designer, how she could barely afford her studio apartment, how unfair life was to someone so creative and sensitive. They painted me as the cold, calculating daughter who cared only about money, while Vivian was the artistic soul who needed family support. Serafina makes more than enough, my father would say during family dinners. She could help her sister out. That's what families do. The guilt trips became a weekly occurrence. Every phone call included updates about Vivian's financial struggles, her broken down car, her mounting credit card debt. They made it clear that my success meant I owed the family something. The embezzlement began innocuously. My mother called one Tuesday evening, her voice thick with worry. Vivian's landlord is threatening eviction. She's 3 months behind on rent. Could you just help this once? The amount was $2,000. Not insignificant, but manageable for someone in my position. I transferred the money immediately, believing I was helping family. But just this once became a monthly pattern. Car repairs that cost exactly what I could afford to give. Medical bills that coincidentally matched my available savings. Emergency after emergency, each one requiring my immediate financial assistance. My parents orchestrated these requests with surgical precision, always presenting them as temporary solutions to help Vivian get back on her feet. The house scheme was their masterpiece of manipulation. For months, my parents talked about how home ownership would stabilize Vivian's life, give her the foundation she needed to thrive. They showed me listings, discussed mortgage rates, painted a picture of family investment that would benefit everyone. If you could just help with the down payment, my mother suggested, Vivian could handle the monthly payments once her design business picks up. What started as a down payment contribution became the entire financial responsibility. My credit score secured the mortgage. My income qualified for the loan. My savings funded every aspect of the purchase. But the deed, that went into Vivian's name alone. My parents assured me this was temporary just until Vivian established better credit. They promised legal documents would be drawn up to protect my investment. Those documents never materialized. Instead, every conversation about my financial contribution was met with deflection, guilt, and emotional manipulation. You make so much money, Serafina. This house means everything to Vivian's future. Surely you do not want to destroy your sister's happiness over paperwork. They positioned any request for formal agreements as selfish, greedy behavior that proved I valued money over family. The contempt and belittlement intensified once Vivian moved into her house. Suddenly, she was the responsible homeowner, the daughter who had achieved the American dream. I became the perpetual renter, the woman who could not commit to anything, the disappointment who made good money but had nothing to show for it. Family gatherings became showcases for Vivian's domestic success and my apparent failures. My mother's Christmas morning comment was the culmination of years of systematic financial abuse disguised as family support. Standing in that kitchen listening to her mock my lack of home ownership while praising the house I had purchased, I realized the depth of their betrayal. They had stolen not just my money, but my achievements, my reputation within the family, and my sense of self-worth. The favoritism was so blatant it bordered on absurd. When Vivian hosted her first dinner party in her house, my parents gushed about her entertaining skills and mature lifestyle choices. When I mentioned considering buying my own place, they questioned whether I was financially responsible enough for such a big decision. The irony was suffocating. They doubted my ability to buy a house while sitting in the house I had already bought. But that Christmas morning, something shifted. Maybe it was the absolute certainty in my mother's voice as she dismissed my life choices. Maybe it was the way Vivian smirked from across the room, fully aware of the truth behind her homeownership. Or maybe it was simply time for the truth to surface. As I smiled at my mother's mocking question, I was already planning how to reclaim everything they had stolen from me. The financial manipulation had been methodical and calculated. They had turned my love for family into a weapon against me, exploiting my desire to help and support those I cared about. Every dollar I had given was documented, every conversation recorded in my meticulous financial records. What they saw as successful deception, I saw as evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and systematic abuse. That smile I gave my mother was not submission or embarrassment. It was the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how this story would end. They had underestimated the same analytical mind that made me successful in finance. They assumed my kindness meant weakness, my generosity meant gullibility. They were about to learn the difference between family loyalty and family exploitation. The week after Christmas, I sat in my downtown apartment, surrounded by 7 years of financial records, bank statements, and documented communications. Every wire transfer, every emergency phone call, every guilt-laden conversation had been meticulously preserved in my files. As a financial analyst, documentation was second nature to me. I never imagined I would need to build a fraud case against my own family. The total amount was staggering. Over the years, I had contributed $147,000 to what I believed were family emergencies and shared investments. The house down payment alone was $85,000. Monthly help with Vivian's expenses had averaged $1,200 for 5 years. Car repairs, medical bills, credit card payments, and countless other fabricated emergencies had systematically drained my savings while building Vivian's comfortable lifestyle. But the evidence went beyond financial records. I had saved every text message from my mother describing Vivian's struggles, every email detailing why my help was desperately needed. The pattern was unmistakable: manufactured crises designed to extract money from me while positioning Vivian as the victim deserving of sympathy and support. They had weaponized family loyalty against me with surgical precision. My first call was to David Kellerman, a family attorney who had handled some corporate legal matters for my company. When I explained the situation, the silence on his end stretched uncomfortably long. "Serafina," he finally said, "what you are describing is financial elder abuse in reverse, combined with fraud and possibly identity theft. The fact that your name is on mortgage documents for a house you do not legally own is particularly problematic." David's investigation revealed layers of deception I had not even considered. The mortgage application listed me as the primary borrower, but subsequent paperwork had mysteriously transferred ownership to Vivian without my knowledge or consent. My signature had been forged on quitclaim deeds. My financial information had been used to secure additional lines of credit that I knew nothing about. What I thought was family exploitation was actually systematic financial fraud. The confrontation I planned was not emotional or dramatic. It was clinical, precise, and devastating. I invited my parents and Vivian to dinner at an upscale restaurant, the kind of place where public scenes were unlikely. I arrived early, arranged for a private dining room, and placed manila folders at each seat containing copies of every document, every transaction record, every piece of evidence I had compiled. When they arrived, the cheerful family dinner atmosphere evaporated quickly. My mother immediately noticed the folders, her face draining of color, as she recognized bank statements and legal documents. Vivian attempted her usual dismissive charm, but her voice wavered when she saw mortgage papers with my name highlighted in yellow. "Before we order," I said calmly, "I think we need to discuss some financial irregularities that have come to my attention." I opened my own folder and began reading transaction details with the same professional tone I used in client presentations. October 15th, wire transfer of $3,000 for alleged car repairs. November 3rd, cashier's check for $1,500 for supposed medical bills. December 1st, electronic transfer of $2,000 for fabricated credit card emergencies. The silence at that table was profound. My father attempted to interrupt with justifications about family support and temporary help, but I continued methodically through 7 years of documented fraud. Every fake emergency, every manipulated crisis, every deliberate lie was laid bare with mathematical precision. The house, I continued, presents the most serious legal issues. My name appears on all mortgage documentation as the primary borrower. My credit was used to secure the loan. My income qualified the application. My savings funded the down payment. Yet somehow the deed shows Vivian as the sole owner. I slid copies of forged quitclaim deeds across the table. These signatures were created without my knowledge or consent. Vivian's composure cracked first. "It was supposed to be temporary," she whispered. "We were going to fix the paperwork once my credit improved." But the additional credit lines David had discovered told a different story. They had used my information to secure over $30,000 in additional debt that I knew nothing about. My mother attempted damage control with tears and emotional manipulation. "How can you turn family love into some kind of business transaction? We are your family, Serafina. Everything we did was to help Vivian build a stable life." But her words carried no weight against the mountain of evidence spread across that dining table. The formal accusation was delivered with corporate efficiency. "What you have done constitutes wire fraud, identity theft, mortgage fraud, and financial abuse. The total amount exceeds federal thresholds for serious felony charges. I am prepared to file criminal complaints and civil lawsuits tomorrow morning unless we reach an immediate resolution." The public exposure began that same evening. I had invited my cousin Marcus to join us for dessert, timing his arrival to coincide with the document review. Marcus worked in local media and had always suspected something was off about our family dynamics. When he walked into that private dining room and saw financial fraud evidence scattered across the table, his journalist instincts kicked in immediately. "This is a story," Marcus said quietly, photographing documents with his phone. "Financial abuse within families is seriously underreported. People need to know how sophisticated these schemes can become." My parents begged him not to pursue the story, but the evidence was too compelling, the fraud too systematic to ignore. Within 72 hours, local news stations were covering the story as an example of family financial abuse. The mortgage company launched an internal investigation when they realized forged documents had been used to transfer property ownership. The district attorney's office opened a criminal investigation based on the evidence I provided. But the most satisfying moment was watching my parents' carefully constructed narrative collapse under scrutiny. For years, they had positioned themselves as loving supporters, helping a struggling daughter while managing a selfish, money-obsessed daughter. Now their community, their friends, their extended family could see the truth. They were financial predators who had systematically exploited their own daughter's generosity and love. The unmasking was complete. The truth was public. The evidence was overwhelming. But this was only the beginning of reclaiming everything they had stolen from me. The media attention following my family's exposure created an unexpected ripple effect that extended far beyond our immediate circle. Within a week of the story breaking, I received dozens of messages from people sharing similar experiences of family financial abuse. Some were distant relatives who had always suspected something was wrong with our family dynamics. Others were complete strangers who had seen the news coverage and recognized patterns from their own lives. The first ally to emerge was my paternal uncle Robert Morrison, who had been estranged from my father for nearly a decade. Robert called me 3 days after the story aired, his voice heavy with validation and regret. "I knew something was wrong when your father stopped talking to me after I refused to lend money for one of Vivian's supposed emergencies," he explained. "He painted me as selfish and uncaring, but I suspected the whole thing was fabricated." Robert's information proved invaluable. He had documentation of similar requests from my parents dating back 12 years, long before I became their primary target. They had approached him for everything from Vivian's college tuition to emergency medical expenses that never seemed to materialize in medical records. When Robert started asking questions and demanding receipts, my father cut off all contact, telling the family that Robert was jealous of their success and bitter about his own financial struggles. "They have been running this scheme for over a decade," Robert revealed during our first meeting at his law office. "You were not their first victim, Serafina. You were just their most successful one." He had kept every email, every text message, every voicemail from my parents requesting money for fabricated emergencies. His records showed a pattern of targeting family members who were financially stable and emotionally invested in family harmony. The second major ally was someone I never expected: Amanda Richardson, the real estate agent who had handled Vivian's house purchase. Amanda reached out after seeing the news coverage explaining that she had felt uncomfortable during the entire transaction, but had been pressured to proceed by my parents. "Your sister never seemed to understand basic homeownership responsibilities," Amanda explained. "She asked questions that suggested she had no idea about property taxes, maintenance costs, or insurance requirements. It was like she expected someone else to handle everything." Amanda's files contained recorded phone conversations with my parents, where they explicitly discussed how I would be responsible for ongoing expenses while Vivian would receive credit for homeownership. They had coordinated this deception with shocking precision, using Amanda as an unwitting accomplice in their fraud scheme. She agreed to testify about their conversations and provide copies of all documentation related to the property purchase. The third crucial ally emerged from my professional network. Janet Wu, a forensic accountant I had worked with on corporate fraud cases, volunteered to analyze my family's financial scheme pro bono after hearing about my situation. "This level of systematic family financial abuse is textbook," Janet explained. "They created artificial emergencies, manufactured crises, and exploited your emotional connection to extract money, while simultaneously destroying your reputation within the family structure." Janet's analysis revealed sophisticated elements I had not recognized. My parents had timed their requests to coincide with my bonus payments and salary increases, suggesting they had been monitoring my financial situation more closely than I realized. They had also coordinated their emotional manipulation campaigns, with my mother handling guilt-based appeals while my father focused on logical justifications for why I should help. But perhaps the most significant alliance came from an unexpected source: Detective Maria Santos, from the Financial Crimes Unit, who had been assigned to investigate my case. Detective Santos had handled numerous family fraud cases and immediately recognized the sophistication of my parents' scheme. "Most family financial abuse involves addiction, desperation, or mental illness," she explained. "Your case shows calculated long-term planning designed to systematically transfer wealth from one family member to another while maintaining the appearance of legitimate family support." Detective Santos introduced me to Dr. Patricia Helms, a forensic psychologist who specialized in family manipulation dynamics. Dr. Helms' evaluation of my parents' behavior revealed elements of narcissistic abuse, financial exploitation, and systematic gaslighting designed to maintain control over their victims. "They created an entire family mythology where your success was somehow selfish unless it benefited Vivian," Dr. Helms explained. "This allowed them to justify increasingly aggressive financial exploitation while positioning you as the problem when you questioned their demands." The Alliance Network grew to include legal, financial, and psychological professionals who were fascinated by the systematic nature of my family's fraud scheme. Each ally brought specialized expertise that strengthened my case and revealed new dimensions of the abuse I had experienced. Robert provided historical context and pattern evidence. Amanda offered insider documentation of the real estate fraud. Janet delivered forensic financial analysis. Detective Santos brought law enforcement resources. Dr. Helms provided psychological evaluation of the manipulation tactics. But the most emotionally significant ally was my maternal grandmother, Eleanor Hartwell, who had been kept in the dark about my parents' financial schemes. Eleanor was 83 years old, sharp as a knife, and absolutely furious when she learned what her daughter had done to me. "I did not raise my daughter to steal from her own child," Eleanor declared when I visited her assisted living facility to explain the situation. Eleanor's perspective completely reframed my understanding of my family's dysfunction. She revealed that my mother had exhibited manipulative financial behavior throughout her life, always finding ways to extract money from family members while avoiding personal responsibility. "Your mother borrowed $5,000 from me 3 years ago for what she claimed was your sister's emergency dental work," Eleanor explained. Vivian's teeth looked fine at Christmas dinner that same year. Eleanor's decision to revise her will became the catalyst for the most intense family drama yet to come. She had originally planned to leave her estate equally between my mother and Uncle Robert. After learning about the financial abuse, she decided to designate me as the primary beneficiary, with specific instructions that my parents should receive nothing. "Family loyalty works both ways," Eleanor told me firmly. "They betrayed you, so they forfeit their claim to family inheritance." The Alliance Network had achieved something I never could have accomplished alone. They had transformed my individual case of family financial abuse into a comprehensive legal and financial investigation with multiple sources of evidence and expertise. Each ally brought unique resources and perspectives that strengthened the overall case while providing emotional support during what could have been an isolating experience. But our success also created new vulnerabilities. The stronger our evidence became, the more desperate my parents grew to discredit our findings and maintain control over their fabricated narrative. They began reaching out to Alliance members, directly attempting to manipulate them with the same tactics they had used on me for years. The turning point came during a strategy meeting at Robert's law office, where our entire team was reviewing evidence and planning next steps. Detective Santos received a call during the meeting that changed everything. "We have a problem," she announced after hanging up. "Someone has been calling our office claiming that this entire case is a vindictive daughter trying to destroy her family because she is jealous of her sister's success. They are suggesting that all the evidence has been fabricated." The caller had provided detailed information about our investigation, including names of Alliance members and specific pieces of evidence that should not have been public knowledge. Someone within our network was feeding information to my parents, giving them advance warning of our strategies and potentially sabotaging our entire case. The alliance that had seemed so strong and supportive suddenly felt fragile and compromised. Trust became a luxury we could not afford, as we realized that someone among us was working for the very people we were trying to hold accountable. The question was who had betrayed us and how much damage had already been done. The revelation that someone within our alliance was feeding information to my parents hit like a physical blow. During our emergency meeting the following evening, the tension in Robert's conference room was suffocating. Each alliance member sat with visible suspicion, wondering who among us had betrayed the trust we had built over weeks of collaborative work. Detective Santos had traced the leak through phone records and discovered something that shattered my faith in family completely. The calls to the police department had come from Amanda Richardson, the real estate agent I had trusted with sensitive information about our legal strategy. But the devastating truth was worse than simple betrayal. Amanda was my mother's younger sister, my aunt who had been estranged from the family for 15 years over a previous financial dispute. Amanda approached me 6 months ago, my mother later admitted, during a recorded conversation Detective Santos arranged. She said she had been watching your career success and wanted to help Vivian get established in real estate. The house purchase was always meant to be a family investment that would benefit everyone. The manipulation had been generational, with my mother recruiting her own sister to facilitate the fraud while maintaining plausible deniability. Amanda's betrayal was particularly crushing because she had seemed like the most genuine ally in our group. Her emotional accounts of feeling uncomfortable during Vivian's house purchase had been completely fabricated. Her documentation of suspicious conversations with my parents had been carefully curated to provide just enough evidence to seem credible while omitting the most damaging details. She had been reporting our every move back to my parents, allowing them to stay ahead of our investigation. The psychological warfare that followed was brutal and sophisticated. My parents launched a coordinated campaign to discredit me within our extended family and professional network. They positioned themselves as victims of a vindictive daughter who was using false accusations to destroy her family because she was jealous of her sister's happiness and success. They painted me as someone who had become so obsessed with money that I was willing to fabricate fraud charges against my own family. Vivian played her role perfectly, appearing at family gatherings and community events as the innocent victim of her sister's mental instability. She told anyone who would listen that I had voluntarily helped her buy the house as a gift, then changed my mind, and tried to claim ownership when I realized how much equity the property had gained. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, the loving sister who could not understand why her sibling had turned against her. The temporary defeat felt complete when several alliance members began questioning the strength of our evidence. Janet Wu, the forensic accountant, discovered discrepancies in some financial records that Amanda had provided, making our documentation appear less reliable than we had believed. Dr. Helms's psychological evaluation was challenged by a competing expert my parents hired, who suggested that I was exhibiting signs of paranoid behavior and financial obsession. Even Uncle Robert began wavering when my parents approached him with a settlement offer that included partial repayment of money I had contributed, plus a formal apology if I would agree to drop all criminal charges and civil lawsuits. "Maybe we should consider their offer," Robert suggested during a particularly difficult strategy meeting. "This legal battle is tearing apart 3 generations of family relationships. Sometimes resolution is more important than being right." The isolation was devastating. My parents had successfully turned my own evidence against me, positioning my meticulous record-keeping as obsessive behavior rather than prudent financial management. They suggested that my successful career had made me arrogant and controlling, unable to accept that family relationships were more complex than business transactions. They painted my quest for justice as selfish revenge against family members who had only tried to help each other. But the most painful betrayal came from grandmother Eleanor, who called me 3 weeks after Amanda's deception was revealed. "Perhaps you have been too harsh on your parents," she said quietly. "They came to visit yesterday and explained how much this legal battle is hurting the entire family. Your mother was crying, Serafina. She said you refused to even talk to them about working things out privately." Eleanor's change of heart was the final blow to my confidence. If my own grandmother, who had initially been furious about my parents' financial abuse, could be convinced that I was the problem, maybe I had misunderstood the entire situation. Maybe my analytical nature had turned normal family financial support into something sinister. Maybe I was the selfish, money-obsessed daughter my parents had always said I was. The criminal investigation stalled when key evidence became questionable due to Amanda's involvement. Detective Santos explained that defense attorneys would easily discredit testimony from someone who had been secretly working with the defendants while pretending to assist the investigation. Our strongest witness had become our greatest liability. My parents' counterattack was legally sophisticated and emotionally brutal. They filed harassment charges against me, claiming that my investigation had caused them severe emotional distress and damaged their reputation in the community. They sought a restraining order that would prevent me from contacting other family members about financial matters effectively silencing my ability to gather additional evidence or support. The civil lawsuit my attorney had prepared was dismissed on procedural grounds when Amanda's contaminated evidence undermined the foundation of our case. My parents' legal team successfully argued that I had manufactured a fraud case based on normal family financial assistance, then manipulated evidence through a conspiracy with Amanda to make legitimate transactions appear criminal. Public opinion shifted dramatically as my parents' narrative gained traction. Local media that had initially covered my story as an example of family financial abuse began questioning whether I had fabricated the entire case. Letters to newspaper editors described me as an ungrateful daughter who was destroying her family over money. Social media comments on news articles painted me as someone who had become so successful that I looked down on family members who needed help. The professional consequences were immediate and severe. Colleagues at my firm began treating me differently, questioning whether someone who would sue their own family could be trusted with client relationships. My boss called me into his office to discuss whether the negative publicity surrounding my personal life was affecting my ability to represent the company professionally. Standing in my apartment that night, surrounded by legal documents that now seemed worthless, and alliance relationships that had crumbled under pressure, I faced the possibility that my parents had won completely. They had not only kept the money and property they had stolen, but had successfully positioned themselves as the real victims while making me appear unstable, vindictive, and obsessed with money. The temporary defeat was so complete that I seriously considered accepting their settlement offer, dropping all charges, and moving to another city to rebuild my life away from the wreckage of our family relationships. Maybe some battles were not worth fighting even when you knew you were right. Just when my faith in justice had reached its lowest point, salvation came from the most unexpected source, Vivienne herself. 3 days after I had drafted a letter accepting my parents' settlement offer, my sister called me at 2 in the morning, her voice shaking with emotion and alcohol-fueled courage. "I cannot do this anymore, Serafina," she whispered into the phone. "The guilt is killing me. Mom and Dad made me promise never to tell you, but there are things you do not know. Things that prove everything you said was true." She was calling from a hotel room downtown, having fled the house she lived in after a massive fight with our parents about continuing the deception. Vivian agreed to meet me the next morning at a neutral location, the 24-hour diner where we used to have sister bonding sessions during college. She arrived looking exhausted and defeated, carrying a laptop bag and manila envelope that she placed on the table between us with trembling hands. "I have been recording conversations for 2 years," she admitted. "I was scared about what would happen if the truth ever came out, so I documented everything as insurance." The evidence Vivienne provided was devastating and indisputable. Audio recordings of my parents planning how to manipulate me into funding Vivienne's lifestyle. Video files showing them celebrating their successful schemes while mocking my generosity. Written communications between my parents and Amanda detailing how to coordinate their deception. Most damaging of all, recordings of my parents coaching Vivienne on how to lie to investigators and family members about the true nature of their financial arrangements. They told me that what we were doing was not really stealing because family money belongs to everyone, Vivienne explained through tears. "They said you made so much that you would never miss what we took, and that helping me was actually helping the whole family. But when I heard them laughing about how stupid you were to keep giving us money, I realized how wrong this was." The recordings revealed layers of premeditation that shocked even me. My parents had researched family financial abuse cases to learn how to avoid detection. They had consulted with legal experts about how to structure transactions to minimize criminal liability. They had created detailed profiles of my personality, identifying psychological triggers they could use to maximize my financial contributions while minimizing my suspicion. But perhaps most damaging was a recorded conversation between my parents and Amanda from just 2 weeks earlier, where they discussed how to discredit me completely if their legal counterattack failed. "We need to make her look unstable," my mother's voice said clearly on the recording. "If she appears mentally ill, no one will believe her accusations against us. Amanda, you know people in mental health services. Can you arrange for someone to evaluate her? The conspiracy went beyond financial fraud into deliberate attempts to destroy my mental health and professional reputation. They had planned to have me involuntarily committed for psychiatric evaluation, using my obsession with their financial crimes as evidence of paranoid delusion. The recordings showed them researching commitment procedures and identifying mental health professionals who might be willing to support their narrative. Vivian also provided bank records and financial documents that Amanda had hidden from our original investigation. These showed additional fraudulent transactions, including credit cards opened in my name without my knowledge, investment accounts they had accessed using forged documentation, and loan applications where they had listed me as a co-signer without my consent. The total amount of their theft exceeded $200,000. Armed with this new evidence, I contacted Detective Santos, who immediately reopened the criminal investigation with renewed energy and focus. "This changes everything," she said after reviewing Vivian's documentation. "We now have clear evidence of premeditation, conspiracy, and ongoing fraud. More importantly, we have a cooperating witness who was directly involved in the scheme." The resurrection of my case attracted a new ally who would prove instrumental in achieving final victory: District Attorney Marcus Chen, who had been following the case and was outraged by the sophisticated nature of my parents' financial abuse scheme. Family fraud cases like this often go unprosecuted because victims are reluctant to pursue family members, he explained during our first meeting. "Your case demonstrates why we need to take these crimes seriously, regardless of family relationships." District Attorney Chen assigned a specialized prosecution team to my case, including forensic accountants, computer specialists, and attorneys experienced in complex fraud cases. They treated my parents' scheme as seriously as any corporate embezzlement case, recognizing that family financial abuse could be just as sophisticated and damaging as business fraud. The psychological evaluation Dr. Helms conducted with Vivian revealed the extent of manipulation our parents had used to control both of us. They created a dynamic where Serafina was responsible for family financial success, while Vivian was responsible for family emotional harmony, Dr. Helms explained. This allowed them to exploit both daughters differently while maintaining control over family relationships. Uncle Robert returned to our alliance with renewed commitment after hearing Vivian's recordings. "I feel terrible for doubting you," he said sincerely. "Those recordings prove that your parents are master manipulators who fooled all of us. Thank God Vivian finally found the courage to tell the truth." His legal contacts helped expedite the criminal prosecution process and identified additional civil remedies we could pursue. Even grandmother Eleanor called to apologize after Detective Santos played selected portions of the recordings for her. "I raised a daughter who became a criminal," Eleanor said with profound sadness. "How could I have been so wrong about what was happening? Your parents manipulated me just like they manipulated everyone else." She immediately contacted her attorney to finalize the will changes that would cut my parents out of her inheritance. The media coverage that had previously painted me as a vindictive daughter shifted dramatically once Vivian's evidence became public. The same journalists who had questioned my motives now described my case as an example of sophisticated family financial abuse that demonstrated the need for better legal protections for fraud victims. Editorial pieces praised my persistence in seeking justice despite massive family pressure to remain silent. But the most satisfying moment came when Amanda Richardson was arrested for her role in the conspiracy. Detective Santos had used Vivian's recordings to build a separate case against Amanda for fraud, conspiracy, and professional misconduct. Watching my aunt taken away in handcuffs, knowing that her betrayal had ultimately provided the evidence needed to destroy my parents' scheme, felt like perfect poetic justice. The resurrection was complete. The evidence was overwhelming. The allies were committed. The legal machinery was in motion. My parents' carefully constructed empire of lies and manipulation was about to collapse under the weight of truth they could no longer suppress or discredit. The criminal trial began 6 months later, and watching my parents sit at the defendant's table was surreal after years of being treated as the family disappointment. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating, with Vivian's recordings providing undeniable proof of premeditation and conspiracy. My mother wept as her own voice played through courtroom speakers describing me as too stupid to realize what we are doing, and laughing about how easy it was to manipulate my emotions. The guilty verdicts were unanimous on all counts: wire fraud, identity theft, financial elder abuse conspiracy, and money laundering. My father received 4 years in federal prison, while my mother got 3 years, plus supervised restitution. Amanda received 2 years for her role in the conspiracy. The judge specifically noted that family relationships did not excuse criminal behavior and that exploiting trust made their crimes more serious, not less. The civil judgments were equally satisfying. The court ordered full restitution of $237,000 plus punitive damages of $100,000 for the emotional distress their systematic abuse had caused. The house was immediately transferred back into my name, along with all equity that had accumulated during Vivian's fraudulent ownership. Their personal assets were frozen and liquidated to satisfy the judgment. But the most meaningful justice came from watching their carefully constructed social facade crumble completely. Friends and community members who had supported them during the initial controversy felt betrayed and manipulated when the truth emerged. Church members they had tried to turn against me publicly apologized and expressed outrage at how they had been deceived. Their reputation in the community was permanently destroyed. Vivian's cooperation with the investigation had earned her immunity from prosecution, but she insisted on entering voluntary counseling and making personal amends beyond what the court required. "I want to rebuild our sister relationship," she told me during one of our therapy sessions together. "I know I hurt you terribly, but I was trapped in their manipulation too. Can we find a way to move forward together?" Rebuilding trust with Vivian became a gradual process of honest communication and consistent actions. She moved into a modest apartment that she could afford with her actual income, returned all furniture and possessions that had been purchased with my money, and began contributing to a restitution fund to help repay the emotional damages her participation had caused. Most importantly, she committed to ongoing therapy to understand how she had been manipulated into participating in fraud against her own sister. The chosen family I built during this process became more valuable than the biological family I had lost. Detective Santos became a close personal friend who helped me understand that seeking justice was not selfish, but necessary for preventing future victims. Dr. Helms continued working with me to process the psychological trauma of systematic family abuse and manipulation. Uncle Robert stepped into the father figure role that my biological father had abdicated through his criminal choices. "Real family protects and supports each other," he told me during one of our weekly dinners. "Your parents forgot that family loyalty must be mutual to be meaningful. You deserve people in your life who celebrate your success rather than exploit it." Grandmother Eleanor's final years became precious time for us to build the healthy family relationship I had never experienced. She lived long enough to see justice served and to know that her inheritance would go to someone who valued family loyalty properly. "You fought for truth even when it cost you everything," she told me shortly before she passed. "That is real strength and real character." The professional growth that emerged from this experience surprised me completely. My company promoted me to partner level, recognizing that someone who could handle complex family fraud while maintaining professional excellence possessed exactly the integrity and analytical skills they valued. My expertise in family financial abuse led to consulting opportunities, helping other companies develop policies to protect employees from similar exploitation. I also began speaking publicly about family financial abuse, helping other victims recognize manipulation tactics and understand their legal options. The feedback from these presentations was overwhelming. Hundreds of people shared stories of family members who had exploited their generosity, their credit, and their emotional connections for financial gain. My case became a catalyst for broader awareness of how sophisticated family fraud could become. The house that had been the center of so much deception became my sanctuary for healing and rebuilding. I renovated every room, removing all traces of Vivian's fraudulent occupation and creating spaces that reflected my actual values and preferences. The home office, where I now manage my investments and charitable giving, overlooks a garden I planted to symbolize new growth from soil that had been poisoned by lies. My dating life, which had suffered during years of financial manipulation and legal battles, gradually improved as I learned to recognize healthy relationship patterns. The experience of being exploited by family members had made me hyper-aware of manipulation tactics, but therapy helped me understand the difference between appropriate caution and self-protective isolation. I eventually found someone who celebrated my success, rather than viewing it as something they deserved to share. The charitable foundation I established with part of the restitution money focuses specifically on helping family financial abuse victims access legal resources and therapeutic support. Too many people suffer in silence because they believe family loyalty requires accepting exploitation. The foundation helps victims understand that real family loyalty flows both directions and that seeking justice for financial crimes is not betrayal. 5 years later, my parents were released from prison to find their world completely changed. Their friends had moved on, their reputation was permanently damaged, and their community had forgotten them. They attempted to contact me through intermediaries, seeking forgiveness and family reconciliation. But I maintained firm boundaries that prioritized my psychological health over their comfort. The justice that mattered most was not their punishment, but my freedom from their manipulation and control. I had reclaimed my financial security, my family relationships, my professional reputation, and most importantly, my sense of self-worth. Their crimes had cost them everything, while ultimately strengthening my life in ways I never expected. Looking back on that Christmas morning, when my mother mocked my life choices while sitting in the house I had unknowingly purchased, I understand now why I smiled so calmly. Some part of me already knew that truth has its own power, that justice delayed is not always justice denied, and that the people who love you properly will never weaponize that love against you. Have you ever experienced family members who exploited your success or generosity? Have you discovered that people you trusted were systematically manipulating your emotions for financial gain? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how families should handle money and success. Please hit that like button if this story of family justice resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about standing up to manipulation and finding the courage to demand the respect you deserve. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that seeking justice is not selfish, and that sometimes the family you choose becomes more valuable than the family you were born into. Thank you for watching my journey from family exploitation to personal empowerment, and remember that your success belongs to you. Your generosity should be appreciated, not exploited, and your loyalty deserves to be mutual. Until next time, keep believing that truth and justice are worth fighting for even when the battle feels impossible.